Peace, peace, my sisters and brothers, in a real way. Let's turn it up. Okay, this presentation will be about maybe 14 slides. The title of this build is The Freedom House Ambulance Paramedics. These are young brothers who revolutionized the industry, and it jumped off in 1967 to 1975, less than 10 years, 8 years to be exact. I was born in 1967, so it has a special place in my heart. The Freedom House Ambulance Service paramedics was known for their high standard of care, which included skills like intubation and defibrillation. Their training and ambulance design standards became the national and international standard for emergency care. So, you know, it's off the hook. This group or the ambulance service, it was founded in 1967 again in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. It was in the Black Hill district. But let's get started. This is the first page, and this is a patch. So this middle piece here, this is it's partial the medical symbol, but I think they put bolts of lightning on the two sides, so they kind of like personalized it. Freedom House Ambulance, 1967, 1975. All right, as you can see, he wrote it and he's highlighted, and all sorts of things. Freedom House Street Saviors, the documentary. He put the early 70s. And I'm going to like just maybe read a sentence or maybe a paragraph and just either continue, go on, move on to the next, or just touch a little bit about it because I did a lot of research. And also, in addition to this, there are, I think, maybe several videos that you can find on YouTube. Over 30 years ago, long before television ever dreamed of emergency, a quiet revolution was beginning in Pittsburgh, PA, Pennsylvania. I don't know, when I was growing up, we used to watch TV a lot, and it was black and white. We didn't have color, but we would watch the shows, MASH and all the other, TV shows. And never did I ever see anything about the Freedom House paramedics. So this is really quite interesting for me. Anyway, it says here, over the ensuing years, it was to provide the national standards for pre-hospital emergency care. Their experiment, this was an experiment. The experiment went by the name of the Freedom House Ambulance Service and embodied the desperate dreams of several dozen people. And this guy here, Philip Holland, he was a CEO of a nonprofit foundation, and as well as he drove an ambulance vehicle himself. So he had his boots on the ground. He had some experience. He also had experience behind the desk in a corporate environment. So he was the perfect uh, advocate for this project. And this was in 67. Advanced idea of high quality emergency medical service. Philip was president of the Maurice Folk Medical Fund, which you can look that up. Also, if you Google it, a former ambulance driver and a chairman of the OEO, which is basically, I think they was trying to say CEO, Health Committee. Mort Coleman of Pitt's Graduate School of Social Work, he was also down with that. Suggested combining ambulance service with a program to train unemployed and underemployed Black men and women as medical technicians. So yeah, it was a project for these people. So what interests me was this guy Morton and Philip, as well as the other two people we're going to eventually mention, they had a vision, and it wasn't just to I guess put it all on the our community, but it was the vision to revolutionize the industry. Okay, so searching for an owner operator, Holland approached the recently formed Freedom House Enterprise Incorporated, FHE. FHE was an outgrowth of the United Negro Protest Committee located at 2027 Central Avenue. In an unprecedented partnership with Dr. Peter Safar, known as the father of CPR, a world leader in resuscitation research, and other pioneers in emergency medicine. Freedom House Paramedics began. Starting from a base in Presbyterian and Mercy hospitals in 1968, they became the first paramedics in the United States. The Freedom House Paramedics has come a long way from those Black unemployable individuals that were first recruited for this project. A substantial number had earned bachelor's degrees, a few had master's degrees, and 3 were in pre-med. All were functioning in the field at a level comparable to the best paramedics in the nation. Memorandum of agreement to Freedom House. In this memorandum signed by the mayor, the city agreed to provide jobs to all interested FHE paramedics without requiring needless recertification. The city agreed to provide a training program for basic level paramedics with the opportunity to repeat the course in the event of failure. And the city agreed to offer FHE dispatchers a course in dispatching as well as employment. So real quick, that's why my man highlighted, because too early in the story to go to like maybe into the future, actually what happened to these men and women. But because I read it, let me just cover it. When things change and the city decided to get involved and take over what these men and women had accomplished in the 8 years, they wanted to move it out of that private sector, and actually the city wanted to take over. Let me just zoom in just for this particular piece here. This is where you had 3 technicians, and this here, she's a doctor. We're going to talk about her. Her name was Nancy Caroline, Dr. Nancy Caroline, and they working on a patient, people standing by watching the background. So this is, the kind of, emergency care that was given, which is similar to today, where you call the ambulance. They have, 2 or 3 people on a truck that, will, come to your aid. But let me just go back here, and this we can finish. Again, I didn't really want to read what was not highlighted, but just to give us a quick, overview. By October 1976, a year after Freedom House ceased operation, only 12 of the 26 persons who had elected to work for the city remained on the city payroll. Now, what does that mean? Were they, doing what they did prior? Were they in the truck? Were they out there saving lives, or were they in the office? At the dispatch station? Were they, janitors? Like what role did they play? Freedom House, street saviors, staff, and trainees. In 1967, long before television ever dreamed of emerging, a quiet revolution was beginning in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Okay, an audacious and probable experiment, which was over the ensuing years to provide the nation, or should I say, national standards for pre-hospital emergency care paramedics. The experiment went by the name of Freedom House Enterprises Ambulance Service, and I think the enterprise was the nonprofit organization that was activist. It was a community center, basically, and they were helping people in the community. Which is interesting, because if you go on the internet and you search for that, you would actually get to see pictures of this person and actually read some interviews he did. Anyway, this is a picture of them at the entrance of the hospital, which is any one of the 2, Presbyterian Mercy Hospital. I think she was the first woman, and this is Dr. Peter Safar. So this is really interesting. Freedom House Ambulance Service started out as a poverty program to help the Blacks and underprivileged in the ghetto community, naming the Hill District in Pittsburgh. And it was out of this mix that the audacious and probable idea of Freedom House Ambulance took shape. Take 40 people off the street corners and pool halls, have had finished high school, get them GEDs, and train them to provide the most sophisticated emergency medical care possible. To provide this care, not in the hospital, but in the emergency. Freedom House also helped change the way ambulances are designed, equipped, and operated throughout the world. It was madness back in 1967. Racism was rampant. It was hard enough to persuade anyone that a layman could be trained to give sophisticated resuscitative care, especially underprivileged blacks. Especially underprivileged blacks. That's interesting. Why load the dice against the experiment and chaos laymen least likely to succeed? That is precisely what Freedom House proposed to accomplish. It did. That's crazy. Can you imagine? They were trained by Dr. Safar, the chairman of the Department of Anesthesiology at the University of Pittsburgh School of Medicine. Yes, he was an anesthesiologist, and you know he specialized in CPR. He's the father of that, they say, and he was kind enough to put all his effort, his professionalism, and everything he knew into this project and into them, and they basically succeeded. 8 years in, they were you know, their work, this project was taken over by the city. Politics. This is here. This is the Freedom House. This is where the community center was at, and it says they rewrote the books on emergency medical, or should I say, emergency medicine. They introduced CPR to the world. They helped to design today's ambulances and 911 dispatch. They were an important part of Black history. It says here, during the 8 years of the Freedom House service, there was mounting pride and e-spirit D Corps among the paramedics. Hill District residents, including patients and their families, applaud the FH service. It wasn't that long ago that the residents of the Hill could not get anyone to come into their area to pick up the sick and ill. At that time, there was only police, and they had wagons, station wagons, or like somewhat like downgrade minivans. And when they would get the call from the Hill District, they either delayed their response, or they went there and like they didn't have the skills to apply the medical techniques to sustain these people, to transport them to the hospital. They just didn't have that experience, let alone they were, racist. They were people that just didn't like Black people, and they didn't like going into the hood. Not only did they get an ambulance service, but also they received the most sophisticated emergency care of the time. This was a poverty program that was meant to fail. Instead, not only did it work, but it helped to propel emergency care into another arena. And here is, let me zoom this in. Go back over here. Sorry about that, guys. So this is a picture. They look like two technicians, a nurse, and obviously a patient. Um, they got her into the hospital. I also read that these guys, even when they brought patients to the hospital, they actually went into the emergency room and they assisted. That is, the doctor. At that time, there were maybe one doctor in the emergency room that basically was doing all work. The rest was nurses. So, I mean, these guys, their role were more than just being paramedics, just for the record. Let me go back here so we can move on and get through this presentation. A few more, be patient with me. We're almost through this. So here's another picture. This is interesting. Let me just read this real quick. Then we look at the picture. The city decided to launch its own mobile intensive care service. There was no room in the city plans for a predominantly Black independent entity called Freedom House. By early autumn of 1975, it was clear that the city funding would not be renewed. Negotiations began between the city and Freedom House to sell FHE equipment to the city and to facilitate the hiring of FHE personnel into the city system. The city also hired and trained its own paramedics. So apparently, this is a brother here that's from the Freedom House, and this is a new technician. This is a Caucasian fella, a pale skinned guy that was there working on the patient. What appears to be this brother was training him. That's what it looks like to me. Here's another picture of the crew. I think my man brought his son for this special photo. There was a brother right there behind his brother. Okay, after 8 years of dedicating their lives to Freedom House, the employees had to watch as white trainees were hired onto administrative level positions with the new city service. The original Freedom House employees had now grown from unemployable to a level comparable to the best paramedics in the nation. Some had earned bachelor's degrees, a few had master's degrees, and 3 were pre-med. And now they were once jobless again, or once again jobless. That's awful. But you know what? Those of you that get a chance to sit in on this presentation, you come to your own conclusion and your own awareness of this hijack. So here, I'm not going to zoom in, but these brothers got the call. Look like they run into their van, the ambulance van. It says from 1967 to 1975, in those 8 years, Freedom House Ambulance Service reinvented emergency medicine, became the proving ground for national standards, and set the pace for emergency medical service in the U.S. and throughout the world. But even the city of Pittsburgh seemed to have forgotten about them. The city of Pittsburgh symbol celebrating their paramedic history shows a beginning date of 1975, the year Freedom House ended. Yo, come on, this is just recently, people, and they still pulling that crap. That is like, you know what? I personally, I know, but I look at the system today in 2024, and it's no different than 1975. It's no different. It was only a few years ago, in my eyes, a few decades, and who would do something like this? Those of us who are aware, this has been going on since, wow. They got a record at, in 1492. Suppose when Columbus came, 1494. But even before that, anytime a foreigner came here. But keep in mind, though, a lot of indigenous Americans, they went overseas. They went abroad to trade way before Columbus came here. So the world knew of America. And imagine the jealousy and envy that started there. But my guess is, this is just my theory, that, from before Columbus, the Americans was trading worldwide. And people didn't have a desperate need to get here other than just trade with the American indigenous people. But once the warring got critical, food got scarce, diseases elevated, or should I say escalated, religion broke out into groups. They start fighting each other, carrying on. People running for their lives. There were people that knew about what existed here. Some theorists or historians say Atlantis was this way, or the Promised Land. I'm not going to say either or, but I'm just giving you an idea, a mental image. These people came here. It ain't like Columbus got lost. He was looking for another place over there on that side. He knew where he was coming for. He knew where he was coming. He might have not drove that goddamn boat, but he knew. He was no navigator, but he knew. He had a navigator that did know. When they got here, they knew what was here. They knew. Because after him, many other explorers and conquistadors came here for one thing. They even say some of them took so much gold back, ships sank in the ocean. That's how greedy they were. So with that kind of mindset, it doesn't surprise me that the city of Pittsburgh can pull something like this. It really doesn't, at least for me. I don't know how you feel about it. Then let's go to the next slide. Here's a cool picture. I mean, just for the record, at this time in the 60s and 70s, we were just, moving through the middle of civil rights, the civil rights movement, where they talk about black and white. But look at here. Most importantly, here is Caroline, Dr. Nancy Caroline. She was I believe a Jewish chick. And she was a very significant pillar of this movement. She was very, very significant. She contributed to these young men and women of their success. And not only at the level of the academic level where she taught, she actually got her boots on the ground. She went into ambulance vehicles and went to the hood, went to the places where she shouldn't have been. She was a courageous woman. Word up. Not to say that the hood was bad, but as a woman in that time and doing civil rights, and she was a white chick. Here we go, right here. It was a really significant piece of Pittsburgh's racial history, which has been lost. Okay, here, this is the Health Incorporated, the NPR. I think it'll do a brief overview, and then they're gonna get into an interview of the author who wrote the book. Because there's one good book out there, and we will cover that real quick because we almost coming to a close. All right, here it is. How a team of Black paramedics set the gold standard for emergency medical response. This was written in 2022, so just recently. Here she is, Dr. Nancy in the vehicle with the brother, and they was going to work. Here, this is cool. Freedom House ambulance. They have the emblem, the logo here. That's really cool. So Dr. Nancy she was a real warrior to me, a pioneer. And it has here Dr. Nancy Caroline paramedic Walt Brown in 1975. That's interesting, right? Probably just a couple of maybe months, maybe weeks, days of them having to get shut down. It is difficult to imagine society without the assurance that skilled professional paramedics will respond to a medical emergency. But before the 1970s, clumsy, haphazard care, often at the hands of police officers, was the norm for emergencies. So much of that they negligent ambulance care was responsible for an estimated 1,200 to 2,000 preventable deaths per year in the United States, according to journalist and former paramedic Kevin Hazard. Anyway, in his new book, American Sirens, Hazard Narratives, the 8-year saga of Freedom House Ambulance Service, the all-Black team of paramedics who pioneered the profession from 1968 to 1975 in Pittsburgh. So they said 68, it could be 1967. Probably was towards the end of the year. The book documents an untold piece of American history, recording how Freedom House saved thousands of lives and influenced the emergence of professional paramedic service in cities across the U.S., eventually setting the gold standard of emergency medical care. Hazard begins the book through the eyes of John Moon, a Black man who was born into poverty at Atlanta's Grady. Let's just go here. Grady Hospital, but found his calling as a Freedom House recruit. Other prominent Freedom House contributors include Dr. Peter Safar, the Austrian-born physician who co-founded Freedom House Ambulance Service shortly after he invented mouth-to-mouth resuscitation, and Dr. Nancy Caroline, the first medical director of Freedom House, who authored the seminal emergency medical services text, Emergency Care in the Street. So you can even get this to get a little bit more information as far as what she did. Also, John Moon, he was, I think he passed. I'm not really sure if he passed already, but we're looking at the millennium, the 21st century. He was doing interviews, and I have one in particular that's really, really interesting. They should try to check out on YouTube. Just type in his name and type out Freedom House Ambulance Paramedics, and you will get John Moon in all his interviews. However, he mentored a female paramedic, a sister, and she excelled. And today she is the chief of Pittsburgh Paramedics. So that's dope. And you can get that information. But at the time of his prior to his retirement, and when he was, in the field, he wanted to be a chief, and he didn't get the position because of the obvious. It goes on to say, most shocking are the stories of preventable deaths before the advent of EMS, illustrating the crater-wide gap the Freedom House service filled. Wealthy white Pittsburgh residents could afford private ambulances, while residents of the Hill District, the city's oldest Black neighborhood, barely received basic city services, let alone a chance for survival in the medical industry. Here's another picture. And this is paramedics Eugene K. and Harold Brown demonstrate their equipment for a guest in 1975. My guess is this brother might have been a politician. He might have been a representative of the city. He might have been one of the governing bodies that I guess eventually shut down the Freedom House. They might even not even had no idea what was happening, but who knows? They might have got the 411 that there was going to be a change, and they probably knew that also. So leave it to your conclusion. Freedom House provided much needed medical care in a neglected community. They also provided employment and training opportunities for dignified work. Some members of the team were high school dropouts. None had formal medical training whatsoever. They became skilled paramedics and dispatchers, saving lives. So don't say that if you can't, perform at, the academic, standards in terms of, tests and all that you can't, excel and, areas that can, provide for you and your family opportunities. In 1972, Freedom House employed 35 crew members, received 7,000 calls a year, and its leaders had established the National Registry of Emergency Medical Technicians to formalize the field. The crew pioneered several medical developments and technologies, including the introduction of medical physicians to ambulance work, allowing medics to transmit EKGs using air casts to stabilize injured bones and joints, and even administering Narcan to overdose patients. These guys were doing what doctors do in the ER. I mean, that's it, pretty much it. And they only had 300 hours to cover all that. So what's up? And matter of fact, John Moon, he was the first paramedic to assert to intubate. NPR spoke with Hazard about the book, The Racism the Predominantly Black Team Face, and how the Freedom House Ambulance Service changed U.S. society for the better. Obviously, they didn't. They did not change the U.S. society because many people don't know about them, even to this day in 2024. I didn't know about them until actually this year. Before that, I didn't know about them, so I can't front. So I can imagine a lot of people, and even people in the field don't know. Even policemen don't know. Even people probably in Congress don't know. And then there are those who do know and who are on the racism team, the prejudice team, they ain't going to tell you anyway. I mean, do you think they changed from 1975 to 2024? I don't think so. Anyway, here now we're going into closing. This is the interview. The interview has been edited for clarity and linked. It says here the EMS workforce today is majority white and male. So they even did it, the females, the white females. With the proportion of Black paramedics around 8%. Meanwhile, most people do not know that this profession has roots in a Black neighborhood in Pittsburgh. Why is it important that the story is told? Or why is it important that the story be told? Right? I had written this memoir about my time as a paramedic, and somebody sent me an email and said, hey, have you ever heard this other story? I realized that not only had I not heard the story, but nobody had. I found it strange that I had been taught by people who began their EMS careers in the 1970s, very close to the genesis of the field, and yet none of them had ever said anything about this. So basically, imagine those brothers that went like in 1976, 1977, and the city had just started this emergency medical service program, and these new cats went in there. What they say, predominantly white males, they went in there and they got their training, maybe a year, 2 years, maybe months after they closed down the Freedom House. And they trained. and never was told about their predecessors. Why? Because they were Black. So once I came across the story, I thought that this was the history of something that had a profound effect on my life, and I wanted to tell the story. So here's the book, y'all. So take a good look at it. American Sirens, the incredible story of the Black men who became America's first paramedics. So this is the book cover. Check this out. American Sirens, a book by Kevin Hazard, tracing the history of the professional ambulance service in the U.S. The interviewer, he says, what was it like to sit down with these people who were so formative in your training as a paramedic and hear their stories? It is not very often you have an opportunity to reach out and touch history. I spoke with the surviving members of Freedom House. The doctors are gone. A huge portion of the paramedics themselves are gone, but some of them are still there. And they had less than 50 people. Keep that in mind, people. This was not a small achievement. This was a massive, massive thing they did. They all say, I was just doing a job, but they knew that they were changing the world. That's why it meant so much to them. I mean, think about that. These people was humble. They were just doing a job. Freedom House changed forever how the ambulance industry works, down to the color of the ambulance, the way that the ambulance was designed, many of the pieces of equipment that we use in the textbook. A lot of people know Nancy Caroline and that she wrote Emergency Care in the Streets. It's this sort of Bible for EMS, but where did that information come from? How did she test those ideas and those theories? Where did those lessons come from? They came from the couple dozen people at Freedom House. On April 4th, 1968, they began work that influenced what people did for decades later. And that is a tremendous legacy. The stamp that they left on the field of EMS, it simply cannot be underestimated. There's too many innovations that were born out of Freedom House Ambulance Service. Think about the innovations. Think about the stuff that they did. The next paragraph, he said he was born in 77. So much of this took place before he was born. We tend to say, well, these things a long time ago, and we've moved on from that. But the insidious nature of this sort of systemized disenfranchisement of an entire group, when they say dissent or to take away. So that's important. Without there's no way to understand who these 24 people were, how unlikely it was that this situation will come about, how important it is that they are the ones to do it first, and how unsurprising it was that they had all this pushback. At one point, Pittsburgh mayor at the time, Robert, they put it, Flaherty, pushed to get Freedom House defunded, discredited, and shut down. By the way, he was a politician. He and others considered the service that Freedom House provided to be un-American. Check that out, un-American. And I looked this brother up, and just look at his last name, Flaherty, right? He may be a second or third generation immigrant, European immigrant. And I don't mean this to offend nobody, but you want to say un-American. We're talking about the Freedom House paramedics, indigenous Americans. And they revolutionized the whole emergency care system. Even the doctors couldn't come close to this. The world was changed because of them. And he gonna say un-American. Do the math, people. Do the math. He defunded, discredited, and shut them down. So he probably lied statistically and told the whole America that people were dying on their watch in comparison to actually what the police were doing. Probably had numbers at 3,000 to 5,000, maybe more than that, that were dying at the hands of these young men and women. This is what a politician did. The un-American thing was the idea of public money being used for what people viewed as a business. There were private companies who felt that getting city money was perhaps unconstitutional. Yeah, right. The other question that came up was if we are going to say that an ambulance is a public service that needs to be paid for with public dollars, what happened to the rest of medicine? Question mark, right? We're going. A common boogeyman of the right is this idea of socialized medicine. Suddenly, it becomes a slippery slope where everything is public. I found that staggering that people are so afraid of a public health system that they would try to handicap even in emergency. House face in the 70s. In so many ways, many things haven't changed at all. Exactly. I think the last 2.5 years have shown that we are unable to learn from our mistakes and plan ahead. That was back then, the 70s. Imagine 2024, we're on the same page, plan ahead. Okay. What happened with COVID? They locked down everything for how many years? And look what we had to go through. And look where it's at today. There's a place in Queens, right by Rikers Island, the river, and it's called 21st Street, right? And it goes across Denmark's Boulevard, 23rd Street. Most at one time there was so many stores open in that area on that strip, 21st Street. So many stores at the like going towards the river, right? Now you go out there, man, stores are closed. First of all, the rents are too high. So if you're not a corporation, how you gonna survive? You're gonna need people. You're gonna need foot traffic. And that area is heavily populated. It's like a European like area, and yet they still can't survive over there. Anywhere you go where it's busy and stores are closed, you have to take that into consideration. It's crazy. We're in 2024. This shit happened in the 70s. So here we go. So people in the ambulance today are fighting for money. They're fighting for benefits. How many years did it take firefighters from New York to get benefits for 9/11 related health problems? Here in Georgia, the firefighters have been fighting to get various types of on-the-job cancer coverage because that was something they didn't have. Now, you're going to save lives you can't even be provided for. Check that out. That's where this is went. Now, we're not even talking about Black people or the Freedom House paramedics. We're talking about people of today. You got all kinds of ethnic groups of people that's in the industry of saving lives. And they're the only people other than doctors who can intubate. For instance, ERs are always crowded, and you've got this incredible resource that you feel you can't tap into because there's this rigid hierarchy that won't allow it. Yeah, all right, rigid hierarchy, we know. There's politicians that won't allow it. Today we have urgent care all over in New York, all over, in addition to the ambulance. And it's still the same thing. What has that improved? Grant you, it's cool in your neighborhood if you have a urgent care you can go to where you have to go to the hospital ER and wait for hours. You go to urgent care. Hopefully, it won't be crowded and you'll be able to get seen by a doctor or whoever, a student, trainee, whatever. I doubt they would have a student uh, sort of unless there's actually a doctor, the student's doing his or her intern. But you get my point. Um, but the urgent care is like it's like the pop-ups. That's what they are. You go in there. We have one that's not too far from here. It's open to 12 midnight. Most of them close at 7 to 8. They're not 24 hours. We do have 24 hours, but it's like on a hand, one hand, 5 fingers. I maybe count like one or two. But most of them have regular hours. I mean, it's good, but it's not good. It has its pros and cons. Okay, this is it. In closing, this is my man wrote. P.S. Dr. Nancy Caroline died December 12th, 2002. She was 58 years old. And it's called Metula, Israel, and in hospice. Check that out. She found it of multiple uh, myeloma cancer. So I guess she had cancer. She was buried in her native home of Boston, originally in USA. John Moon, one of the Freedom House members who survived the city training program for paramedics, retired from the city of Pittsburgh Fire Department as an assistant chief Division of EMS in 2010. You see, it was 2010. It wasn't that long ago. After serving for 35 years, so he never got that permission, that promotion as a chief. He retired as assistant. I see the interviews of him, and he doesn't seem bitter, but I'm sure deep down it bothers, especially being a black man and what they went through in the '60s and what he went through and what we would imagine will be equal opportunity for everybody here in America in the 21st century. I'm sure he has some some hard feelings about that. But you know what? He retired. Like again, he spoke very well of the medical emergency field. He mentored that chief, which is a female, black female in Pittsburgh. So, and I believe it's Pittsburgh. Don't take it for sure. Look it up. I think I'm more than likely. I think it's Pittsburgh, but he mentored her, and she's now the chief, and I've seen this in some. I think some place on the internet where she thanked him and she acknowledged him as being her mentor. She also acknowledged the Freedom House ambulance paramedics. So she gave props to them. Shout out again to her. Shout out to the Freedom House ambulance paramedics. Shout out to you who sat in on this presentation for this time. I wanted to shorten it, but it went a little bit more longer than I wanted to. Again, I wanted to ask you to hit the like button, please. Share this video, subscribe. I got some more information coming. Check out my TikTok. I also have some good stuff on my TikTok. I'm going to upload a video today on TikTok. You can find me at N as in Nancy, D as in David, N as in Nancy, _Rev, Robert Eddie Victor. So that's NDN _Rev. Definitely check out my TikTok. I got some really good stuff uploaded, and I'm working on at least 2 or 3 projects now that I'm researching, I'm editing. I like to also go to the locations that I want to share about. I like to go to the location if I can. New York has a lot of historical spots, a lot of locations that has history and has been there's been manipulation, there's been wrongdoing, there is untold history. So I'm doing pieces on that. Like I said, I'm going to upload a video today, so definitely go check it out. That's my time. If it's daytime, wherever you at, definitely enjoy it. Here in New York, it's sunny. The birds are chirping. The leaves are changing. We're going into fall. It's 50 plus. I'm going to definitely enjoy this day. I ask you do the same. Stay healthy. Peace to the air. Peace to the sky. Peace to the earth. Peace to the oxygen that we breathe. I'm out.